Welcome back to Behind the Brim, where we go inside the mind of scratch golfers, club champions, and industry experts. Our goal is to uncover insights that'll help you lower your handicap and enjoy the game of golf even more. I'm your host, Cameron Lindsay, and I want to personally thank you for joining us for today's show. If you have any questions about anything you hear or just want to get in touch with us, please reach out at our Instagram, behindthebrim_golf, and we'd be happy to chat. Without any further ado, let's get to today's guest. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by Jordan Gregoris. He's a scratch player out of Victoria Golf Club, and his swing reminds me of Max Homa's. I had the pleasure of playing with Jordo on the Queen's University golf team, where he achieved the OUA Rookie of the Year, Most Valuable Player, as well as team captain over his 4-year tenure. Other notable accomplishments for Jordan include an individual silver medal at the 2015 OUAs, 2015 Provincial First Team All-Star, and a third-place team finish at the 2016 Canadian Nationals. He currently holds the position of Senior Account Executive with Shopify and recently became a published author with the release of his book, Schizo Circa, Growth Through Golf. It's a pleasure to have him with us today. Jordo, thanks for joining us, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. Great to be here and good to see you again.
Likewise, and I hope I pronounced the name of your book correctly. I know we're going to jump into that later, but please correct me along the way.
Yeah. Schizo Circa, but it's a mouthful, so I get it. Yeah.
Starting off on a bit of a low note, but Schizo Circa, we got it now.
All good, man. All good.
So Jordo, it's a treat to have you with us. How we basically kick things off with all of our guests, we just want to contextualize your experience in the game for our listener. And to get things started, can you just share a little bit about how you got introduced to this game that we both love?
Yeah. My story's kind of cool. My family, I grew up with two brothers, and my family spent some of our summers when we were really young. We started going to a place on Lake Huron, and there's this old like a farmer built this 9-hole course not far away from it, and sand, greens, everything's rough. Just volunteer would just come in and cut the fairways. And I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old, and we just kind of always had a golf club in our hands because of that. And on the front lawn, we'd be taking swings. And then, yeah, like a lot of the people, a lot of the other cottagers in that area would play some of the more competitive events in the area, something called the Great Bruce Junior Tour, which was amazing. Every Friday you go and play a junior event, 1-day event kind of thing, on a season long or summer long points race. So it was pretty cool. I did 2 years of that, I believe, before I started taking it a little bit more seriously, sort of into my later high school years, and played at university with you, obviously. And honestly, I find myself more and more sort of engrossed in the game the longer I've played it. It's only gotten more rewarding as I've gone on and played more and more.
Yeah, I love that. Like the early start to the game, and it's so cool to see that it's been like a theme and a constant in your life. And I totally can resonate with that. Like golf has become, I almost appreciate it more as I get older than I did when I was younger. I think I maybe took it for granted. So it's really neat to hear the origin story for you there too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. It's a difficult game for a kid, right? It's especially in competition. So I think it's like an incredible experience to have the younger you are, right? Even 14, like you can just remember how emotional playing competitive golf is. You're responsible for this white ball. It's probably some of the most responsibility you've had in your life to that point. And 18 holes in competition is a lot of pressure. So it's a pretty neat experience.
Yeah, especially when your self-worth is tied up in the number on the scoreboard for a lot of those years too.
Yeah, it's easier to play the game when you don't care about that, but it's hard to decouple it. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump into how we kick every episode off with the report card section. I know I shared with you a little bit offline the format, but essentially we'd love to get an understanding of your personal grading of your game, and would love to just understand where you'd grade yourself in terms of driving, iron play, chipping, and putting. And for our listener, this guy, I mean, you swung the club back at school so on plane. Like that club just wouldn't dare get off plane. Warming up next to you and Russell, that'll make you feel insecure real quick. So I'm interested to unpack where you go with this.
Yeah. So I think if I had to rank them, I'd rank them probably exactly as you have there. Driving is definitely my main strength. Iron play being the next, and then short game, and then putting. Short game and putting sort of on a similar wavelength with each other. Yeah, yeah, I would say that driving is probably the my outsized skill of the rest of my game by quite a margin as well.
So if we had to give them the grade, it's
Right.
report card section. I'm just curious to know where your head goes with like the ranking as well.
Yeah, I would say with driving, I would say it's an A, and then I would say with my iron game, I'd be saying more like maybe like a B minus, and then I would say short game and putting. I would put them into like the C minus category for me. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm actually glad that this is the ranking we got because I really wanted to unpack your long game with you.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. Yeah.
I know we used to chop it up in the hotel rooms on the road, but this is now you can finally reveal all your secrets, so I can swing like you.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it.
So let's start with driving, dude. Like, want to just really kick it off here. Like, what are some of your fundamentals for successful driving?
Yeah. I'm very much a perfectionist with my golf swing. Um, and I think that really lends itself to fairly neutral, situational golf swings. So if you were to look at like every time I can put a tee in the ground, right? I essentially feel like I have the absolute advantage. I'm on a flat lie with a tee in the ground. I got a driver and a ball, and you can just go and swing. But there are a few things that I think are really, really important that make me a little bit better, which is it's easy for me to hit up on the golf ball, whereas some people have a hard time with that. And I think that lends itself perfectly to delivering a driver. And the other thing I think is I'm fairly meticulous in how I align myself. And I think a lot of mistakes on the tee are made before the golf swing even starts, and a lot of folks don't notice that. So yeah, those two things. Obviously, in terms of just my natural fit, that my ability to hit up on the golf ball is certainly what sets me apart, and what I think causes people to recognize that skill of mine more than right away. Is just it looks a bit different because I can hit up, and deliver that ball, that club with, I can sort of loft wise, into the 14 sort of degree mark, and if I can keep the spin down, it's just a bit of a missile. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, no, and when I saw your swing, like it is an impressive look when you're driving off the tee, and it's cool to hear that you kind of boiled it down to just 2 points there. Like let's have a positive angle of attack, let's hit up, and let's
Yeah.
be really diligent about a good alignment, good setup. Like for our listener
Mm-hmm.
who maybe is struggling with that, maybe is coming over the top, is hitting down on the ball, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have those same launch characteristics, like did you ever consciously work on that, or is there something that we can idea share here to just help our listener with how can they start improving their angle of attack and try to hit up on it a little more?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I am very focused on, well, I mean, I definitely tee the ball forward. That's the main thing, right? Not necessarily super high, but I definitely tee it pretty far forward. Like I have a bit of flare in my front foot, and that thing's on like kind of the ball of my foot, so it's not off my inner heel. And I think that's just going to naturally allow you to hit more up on the golf ball and a little bit across it, which can give you that sort of high fade shot. Now, that's if you have a very neutral swing. And as you mentioned, my swing is very neutral, right? So if I just tweak things like that in the setup, there's not going to be a ton that goes wrong. And that's just because I really focus on having an extremely neutral swing, right? So I think this is where the alignment bit is important, because when I'm practicing, I'm really trying to hit straight shots. I'm actually everywhere on the golf course. I'm like trying to hit a straightish ball. Like I'm not lining up for to see a huge fade really ever, unless I like absolutely have to, or hit a big draw. If anything, I have a very small fade. Like when I'm swing it really good, it's a pretty charging flight, but it's a fairly, probably a little bit higher than average fading shot. And I'm essentially lining up for a straight ball every single time. And that comes from practicing for that, right? So if I practice for that, then I can go to the course and I know that it's there. If I was somebody who had a lot of shape, well, I think alignment is just a lot more complicated for somebody like that, right? Like if you hit a big charging draw, like one day you might be lined up properly on that tee, and the next day, if you're hitting a little more of a slinger, like you're not going to be lined up correctly, right? So having less variability and when you're practicing to try and be more neutral, I think really lends itself to just being able to day in, day out, line yourself up, take your line, take your stance, and then just swing it and know that like you're not going to really be surprised.
I like that. So the two takeaways I'm hearing is there's an intentionality around where you're playing the ball in your stance, like playing it forward promotes that upward angle of attack versus sometimes you see people that just haphazardly gets a little further back in their stance without the awareness being there. We spoke with another guest around they're conscious of, as a right-handed golfer, creating a bit of an axis tilt. So the right shoulder gets a little bit below the left. Their right shoulder kind of comes down and back a little bit. So they're in a position to actually hit up. Is that something you do like unconsciously at this point? Is that something you would encourage people who are hitting down on to maybe try as well?
Yeah, I kind of like resist the urge to really give any method of hitting up if I haven't seen the golf swing that I'm trying to help. So I would say like I really think that because the driver's longer and if I move the ball up in my stance, what's going to happen? Like I'm going to have axis tilt, right? And if I'm square, then that shoulder is below, right? The right shoulder, I'm a righty. The right shoulder is going to be slightly lower. That ball's just further up. Driver's pretty long, right? So I would say like, less like there's no real like one way to do it, but I think making sure my lines are square. Like when I'm looking at my golf swing, right, or I'm looking at a video or a photo or something like that, and I'm taking my setup. If I'm super shut or something like that, like what's the point of even judging that golf swing, right? Like it started from the wrong position, so there's nothing right that can happen from there. And so that's something I've really learned just in the last few years. We can get fairly nerdy about this, but this guy, Michael Hebron, who Sean Foley likes a lot, he does a lot of really interesting stuff about teaching, and he is focused on golf instruction, but he also just talks about like teaching methodologies as well. And he has this idea that like the body knows its alignment, and like the more conscious you are about it, interestingly, he thinks that like if you set up to a golf ball, right, your body knows if it's even possible to hit it there. And that's why people compensate and do all these crazy things, right? And so I actually, from understanding his idea of like this, the body knows kind of concept, I go through my routine and align myself properly so that my body doesn't have to compensate for anything and it can make the most natural as possible. And when I do that, right, it typically goes, it's a good shot, right? Like, when you look at your divot after you hit a shot, you're like, oh, how did that wedge go? Like 10 yards left. Like it's a pretty big miss, right? You look down and your divot's going left and you're like, what? Why was that? Right. And so I find that like, you could kind of back that up and wonder what happened. Right. But if your body isn't comfortable over the shot, it's not going to be a good shot. And if your body does know what you're ultimately trying to do and where you're trying to hit that, even when you're standing along the target line, like over the ball. And I think that's just like, it's like it builds itself right into the pre-shot routine, right? Like my body knows, so I better make sure that I can put it in a good position to just let it happen. And when I do that, you're just going to see really, really good deliveries each time, and your body's not going to feel like it needs to do anything other than swing. That's
gold, dude. I hadn't heard that philosophy before, but I'd heard somebody say like everything that somebody does in the golf swing, if it's unorthodox, is not a hindrance. It's because it's trying to get the ball. It's trying to do what you're intending to do with the golf ball. Like to your point, if you set up way shut, as a righty aimed way right, like you're probably going to come over the top and try to like pull that ball back online. Like,
right.
That's such a powerful idea. Like of course starts in the setup, but just if you start with a nice neutral setup, it's going to promote like a more neutral takeaway and like a more neutral release and all these good, like a positive chain of events.
Exactly. So like I'm really meticulous. I mean, we're not like this, we're talking about the entire, really like all ball striking now. And even putting to some extent, but like I'm very focused these days on my grip. And if I were to go back in time, I would tell myself to be really focused on my grip, because I actually think the club can only do what the club can only get into the positions that the grip allows it to, with some, adjusting for like some level of flexibility and athleticism from the body that's holding the club. Right. So like so every time I'd be like, why is it so shut at the top? It's just like, my grip's got it is in such a way that there's absolutely no chance I can get it into a better position. So interestingly, I think the grip is just like the alignment, in that like if you're doing anything weird or anything unorthodox, your swing's never going to look neutral, because you're just simply not holding it in a way that's going to allow the club to move naturally through the ball. And so I'd be very, very careful if I had to go back in time about like I used to play with a super weak left hand, right? And so like that's going to be bowed, that's going to be like flattened, that's going to cause all kinds of weird things. And like the delivery I'm not going to be able to feel like I'm on top of that, sort of covering the ball. And that's been something I've really realized more recently, is like, yeah, like it starts there. It starts with how you're holding it, then how your body's setting to it, and then what's your body going to be able to do. It's the combination of those things.
Dude, you're literally you're preaching here. Like this, we've talked, Chan and I, around how important the fundamentals are. And we started with the grip being the foundation and alignment being number 2. So I want to hear it from you firsthand. Let's start with the grip. What are you looking for in a neutral grip? Like when you look down at your hands as a right-handed golfer, like what boxes are you looking to check?
Yeah. Wow, this is a great conversation, because I don't get to talk to too many people about the grip. Interestingly enough, I have a buddy who's getting into golf, and I actually tell him to, like, before you go to the range, send me a video of your grip, and like we'll just kind of do a daily check-in. I honestly didn't really start obsessing about this until last summer. I read Ben Hogan's biography about his life, and also like how his life and how it ties into all these events in American history, which is really well done. But basically, he's like all about the grip, right? Like he's the 5 fundamentals of modern golf, right? One of the most famous golf books in the world, right? And he's got, and I basically it inspired me to not use mid-sized grips. I think this move to big grips sells a lot of grips, but I don't think it actually benefits a lot of golfers. And I think I went down to like just standard 1 wrap, like the only wrap you need underneath the grip, and just as small as possible. And my hands aren't small, but I think what it does is it helps me keep it in my fingers more, so my hands are a little more on top of it. And I think if you ever have sore forearms, it's probably because you're really like you're gripping it in the meat of your hands versus in your it should come out sort of the butt and the fingers, right? Your left hand should be sitting on top of it if you're a righty. So I think when I describe a neutral grip, I'm describing the relationship between my top and bottom hand. And so if my top hand is a little bit strong, like, they talk about how many knuckles you can see from address on your top hand. Like I'm probably 2.5, depending on how my body's aligned, because that also matters, right? But let's just say 2 knuckles for sure. So it's on top of that grip, right? Like it's strong-ish. I don't have my thumb right down the middle. It's actually off a little bit to the side. And then I've got the right hand actually a little bit weak. So my lower hand is actually a little bit weaker, and that offsets it. So that's what I think about when I think about a neutral hand, is like, if you're going to be on top of the club, then your hands need to be turned toward each other, right? Like sort of in opposing sides. And that allows you to deliver the club and keep your arms really connected to your body through the swing. And so, yeah, that's exactly what I try and do, and just try and make sure that it feels really good. And having a smaller grip's really done that for me. I get to just kind of like feel it, and it feels really strong, and I can just kind of be more natural when I feel like I'm on top of that. And I think if I look in old videos of me hitting golf balls and whatever, like it's just all over the place, like it doesn't look like I'm deliberately holding this club the same way every time. And so why am I expecting to hit the same shot every time? It's not going to be possible. I talked about my approach. What makes me a good driver, makes me a good ball striker, is being really neutral, being meticulous, taking great alignment, and swinging freely through the golf ball, and not asking my hands to do too much at all, really.
Yeah, dude, I love the simple call outs, but it's somebody said this to us before. They said the tour pro is losing sleep over the things that we're not even worried about. I think for a listener too, like sometimes it's tough to describe the grip, but we've called this out before. Pull up a photo of Tiger Woods, maybe from 2019, like where he's swinging super neutral,
Yeah.
and look at his hands, look at the way they're oriented on the club. And we're not always saying mimic what other people do, but like that's a really good starting point. If you were able to orient your hands in the club like Tiger in 2019 when he won the Masters, like you're in pretty good shape.
I think if you're like a 10 or 15 handicap and you look at Tiger in 2019 is a great example. There's a lot of good examples out there, but let's just say, let's use that. And you do something drastically different, ask yourself why you need to do that. Because I think it's an easier question. It's like, oh, I do this because, and if you have a good reason, right? Like, I'm not that flexible. I can't get the club that far back, or, there's different, maybe good reasons, maybe bad reasons, but there should be a reason, because neutral is going to be easier, right? A straight club coming through the golf ball, a squared club coming through the golf ball consistently is going to just equal really low scores, because there's not much that can go wrong after that. And that's essentially what I'm trying to take care of, right? Is just how can I be hitting straight balls as consistently as possible, and having a shitload more fun because of it.
Yeah, dude, this is speaking to me. Like that's kind of how I approach the game. But even just hearing the reassurance from you on like, no, this is what a really good ball striker's focused on. Like I said, super reassuring. And like as a takeaway for our listeners who are at home, they maybe want to have like practice. We've advocated to just practice gripping in a mirror. Is that something you would encourage them to do as well?
Oh yeah, like I have a little mat here behind me, and I'm always just taking a setup, right? Like I put a ball down, I'm not doing anything, but I'm just gripping the club, making sure my body feels like I can get kind of right into that right before I start position. The better I can do that, the more consistently I can do that. Obviously, I try and practice every couple of days and hit balls. That's the only real way to know if you're doing it right. But just making sure the club doesn't, you don't go through one of those periods where the club starts to feel weird, or you need to kind of like refresh how you're approaching the setup, right? The setup is, it's so important that you want it to feel good over the golf ball, right? And you don't want to be searching in your setup for something that can be a really challenging place to play golf from.
Love it, dude. Take us to alignment here. It's something you've spoken on. 2 questions here. How do you practice your alignment when you're on the driving range? And part 2 would be, how do you actually align correctly when you're on the golf course?
Yeah. I used to work at a junior golf camp, and kids are awesome because they just they swing so naturally, right? So I'm just trying to keep their hands on the club. But if we can get, the hot dog in the bun and the 2 thumbs on, like good enough, and they just swing, right? So they also have a lot of flexibility, which is interesting. And so all I'm trying to help them with is like, look, take your big target, right? So where am I trying to hit this ball? And I have to always teach them like the ball is not the target. The ball's in the way of your swing. So you take your big target where you ultimately want the ball to go. Then you find something, 3 inches in front of your ball, not too far ahead, just sort of 3 inches, 4 inches in front of your ball. And then you align to that sort of imaginary line, right? Because from the side, you can't just guess it, right? We've all hit shots, just rake one, hit one, rake one, hit one, rake one, hit one. Like the more you do that, the lower your chances of aligning. So like on the range, I'm constantly stepping back, find my big target, find my little target. What am I trying to do? Okay, step in and hit it, because that's the motion of golf, right? It's like it's all of that in one sort of thing. If you look at timing, which is also really important, right? Like the best players in the world have the exact same timing from behind the ball to hitting the shot. And so I try and keep that. It's something I should work even more on probably. But yeah, big target, little target, do it. So yeah, that's really, really important. You can just go like chasing your tail if you're not really trying to understand, like, was I even letting myself, was I even inviting the possibility of this going down the target line if you aren't taking care of all those things? And it's just about being disciplined and making sure you don't get lazy, and you'll be rewarded for it.
Dude, you just said so many good things there, like inviting the possibility of essentially hitting the shot where you want it. Like
Mhm.
something I'll hang out with some of my friends who are just getting introduced to the game, and you'll go down the range at a public driving range, and I can tell without even seeing somebody swing almost their level of ability by their setup and also how they walk into the shot. Like to your point, on every single shot, I practice the skill of alignment because I don't hit a ball without stepping behind it, doing exactly like you
Mhm.
just described. I pick my target, my end target. I pick a small intermediate target, the small target,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
walk into every single shot and I align to it the same way. And it's almost like clockwork at this point.
Yeah.
And you see so many people just unknowingly fall into the trap of, like you said, rake another ball, hit, rake another ball, hit. And there's no feedback. There's no intention around like, where am I aiming the barrel of this gun? Um,
Right.
and then to your point, you start misaligning yourself and you're making compensations that you're not even aware of. Um,
Mhm.
so just the call out to like go through that process every time. Like instead of getting the 150 ball bucket or the 100 ball bucket, get the 45 ball bucket and take the same
Yeah.
amount of time. And just, you don't need to take practice swings every time, but just walk in from behind the ball.
Mhm.
Um, that's beautiful, man. And I actually think that's a big reason why a lot of people struggle to take their game from the range to the course, because if they just hit it the same pin and just haphazardly rake ball after ball, when you get out on the golf course, that's the last thing that happens. Like you're now being asked the question of, okay, aim at this target, a dog leg right, aim at this target. Now, okay,
Right.
you're oriented in a completely different fashion. Now aim over here. Like the skill of
Mhm.
aiming is required on every shot. So like,
Exactly.
what a great call out on your end there.
I think the way to sort of govern this is if you're ever on the range and ask yourself this: is the target the center of my golf club? If I'm on the range and all I'm trying to do is hit a pure iron shot, then I'm wasting my time and golf balls, because that doesn't matter, right? Like it's all great to hit pure iron shots. It feels incredible. It's so much fun. People are impressed. All this stuff goes the right distance. All that stuff. But when you like you're not actually practicing the golf. You're not, because golf doesn't care, right? The score on the card doesn't care how solid you're hitting it.
Yeah.
But like what ultimately you're trying to hit the ball somewhere, right? And so if that's the center of your club, like you're just not practicing at that point, right? You're just like, and I go through this sometimes too, right? You hit a weird shot and you're like, oh, let me just try that again really quick. It's like that's exactly the time you need to step out of the batter's box and like realign yourself and put some intention behind what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Dude, I think if there's one takeaway from this chat for anybody listening that's trying to get better, it's practice your grip, be intentional with the way that you're putting your hands on on the club, and try to be consistent with the way that you do that. And then when you're practicing, step from behind the ball, walk into every shot as you would on the golf course, pick a big target, pick a small target just in front of the ball, and set up that way, and you will get better. Like there's no way that somebody who's struggling starts implementing this and doesn't improve. Like, and I actually think that's something, it's funny you say that. Like my grip has been an area of focus for me over the last 6-8 months. I found that it's easy to just haphazardly throw your hands on the club, and then you get kind of timey with how I'm going to square this face. And it's like, no, I just want to make a nice balanced, like neutral swing and not have to worry about like timing my hands through the hit.
Exactly, right? It's like you know, there's that, I don't know who said it. Uh Show me somebody who hits their wedges full and I want to play them for money. Because like what's the best shot ever, right? It's like when maybe you're hitting a shot and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna take like 5 yards off this, and it just lands right behind the pin and stops, right? Like you essentially said to your body, like, you just need to make a good golf swing here. Just you have more than enough club. Just relax, make a nice move, and then you do that, right? Versus, I just need to kill this shot. I'm gonna need a little something extra out of it. All that is not gonna happen, right? You're just gonna hijack what you're trying to do. So yeah, absolutely. Being meticulous and setting up, allowing your body to make a really natural, what looks like an effortless move is just going to set up to hitting some really, really good golf shots.
And before we move on to the iron piece, I know there's overlapping elements here, of course,
Sure.
but we've also talked about the idea of parallel lines when you set up, and also aligning the club face first to that little target and big target, and then setting your feet second. Is that
Mhm.
something you're also a proponent of in terms of aligning yourself?
Oh yeah. I mean, the parallel line things was a big breakthrough for me. I was working with Henry Brunton, who's a golf coach at based out of Toronto in Canada. He's like really successful guy, and I was working with him. I was probably 17, and um, there was he kind of like brought that to me. He's like, oh yeah, like your body isn't going to be aiming at the target. It's going to be aiming left of it. I'm a righty, right? Like so. If I'm trying to hit a straight shot, then I need to actually allow for that. My body's going to be actually parallel, right, to the target line. And so, yeah, that's a really important thing to think about, right? Because then, essentially, if you haven't thought about that yet, you're closed on every single shot, and that causes a lot of timing, and is probably responsible for a lot of the average golfer slicing the ball because they're just shut, and the body's trying to compensate and do something to get it back on the line. So, yeah, and if you watch all the best players in the world, right, they're aimed left, right? At least, and they might even be open with their body, right? And then they hit that power fade, right? So that's something that's really, really important is understanding, yeah, your body's not going to be aimed right at the target. And club face first, for sure. Like whenever I'm hitting it best, I just have a really good feeling for what it looks like for that club to be aimed square to my little target, right? Like I could put it behind the ball, and it's like a sense that you kind of get from hitting a lot of balls that club face is actually dead square. And it's weird because sometimes you won't even realize it, but it's super shut or super open. And maybe it's actually harder to detect when it's shut because your hand will be ahead and you'll be like, oh, it should be square, right? It's like, no, you're making this harder for yourself. Yeah. So I think, yeah, absolutely that. And I tend to set my upper body first when I'm hitting it well. So I'll be, club face behind the ball, and what it feels like with my upper body, right? And sort of like get into that and then set my feet.
Nice.
Then try to keep some constant motion. Maybe I'm changing pressure or whatever. Maybe a waggle. I don't do much of a waggle, but some sort of waggle, and then initiate the swing. So yeah, it's definitely that. Behind the ball, body's aimed straight, but technically a little bit left of target. Club face first, lower body second, waggle and go.
Yeah, and that was a big concept that I didn't really grasp when I was younger, where I just stepped into the ball, probably body first, aiming my body at the target, and then club face second. And to your point, you instinctively know that you're aimed right, so you compensate by coming over the top. And when I was taught that, hey, you aim the barrel, like you aim the barrel of the gun, the club face first, and then you settle in with your feet, it's so much easier to get that sensation of parallel lines because the face is aimed down the line, and then I just basically line my feet parallel to my face. So I have that frame of reference of like, oh man, my feet are aimed way right at my face. Then I know that I'm closed with my stance. So
Absolutely.
last thing, I know I said last before, but before we do move on, do you use an alignment stick at all to get some feedback, or are you just more a sensation type guy?
No, definitely an alignment stick. I don't do like a ton of alignment sticks, just one, and I kind of put it, I'll just kind of hit over top of it kind of thing. So I have what I'm aligning to, and then it's a pretty small range of Victoria. So when I'm hitting drivers or long irons and stuff like that, I just hit off like the mat itself, right? I'm just trying to set my body to a perfectly neutral shot, and then hit into that way. So always just trying to know like where's square, right? Like if you know where that is, then just not much that can go wrong. And I think that has always been my approach. I try not to get like really too technical with the golf swing, because if you know where neutral is, you don't need to do that much. And the patterns that your body follows, again, follow the grip, they follow your turn. And so, yeah, I might think about my turn or where I'm turning from, or, these little like sensation sort of things like that. But I think the best thing a golfer can do is just have faith that and confidence that nothing bad is going to happen. and doing all these things before you even take the club back really just eliminates a lot of those possibilities. And then you build confidence because you just see good shot over and over again.
And for our listener, when you say you're over top of the alignment stick, is the alignment stick like in the middle of your toe line and ball line, or where is the alignment stick relative to your feet, let's say?
Yeah, a few inches in front of my feet. Yeah, a few inches. Yeah, it's probably closer to my feet actually. But yeah, I'll just try and because then it's like you look down, right, and you can kind of like feel your alignment with your upper body too, just kind of being right there. Ultimately, I'm always, even if I have an alignment stick, I'm getting behind it first. But yeah, and then Yeah, I don't like I don't like doing things that where I'm, some people they'll have like a train track and they're hitting shots like out of these two lime sticks that are really close together. Like I don't think there's any sense in adding any like stress to your practice, right? Like
Yeah.
there's just no way you're not like a little bit like I don't want to hit these sticks. So I try not to just make it's just a frame of reference and to make sure
Gotcha.
that
Gotcha.
I'm not like grooving anything that's not neutral.
I love it, man. You and I could talk about that forever, but
Sure.
I do want to move on, and it's brilliant, dude. Like I wish I knew this stuff earlier. Like to your point, if I'd known this stuff earlier, I think I would have been a lot better a lot sooner. So I love that you're calling it out. And I mean, transitioning into irons, like you mentioned, it's a full swing. The neutral fundamentals remain the same for an iron as a driver, but is there any is there anything that differs there? Obviously, angle of attack isn't going to be up, but is there any other thing that you do consciously different with the irons over the driver?
Yeah, I'm glad we spent so much time on full swing with driver because there's not honestly not much more to say here. Like I really think that like my long iron game, just like my driving game, is sort of what I think is the most impressive to people. And ultimately, it's because I have a very neutral setup, right? And I can deliver the club, and I deliver the club with maybe a little bit more loft. Now, in my opinion, sometimes a little bit too much, but like everyone wants to hit the really high long iron, right? Which is great. I just always just say it has to go the right number. I just don't want to hit these things into the stratosphere and them come down in a guessing game, right? But so I think it's a shorter club. It's slightly further back in your stance, but I honestly think like the club itself really dictates how your body's going to set up to it, and and whether it's on a tee or not, right? Like long irons are almost never on a tee, right? Unless you tee it up tiny bit, it's not going to make a big difference. And so, just make a good swing, and you're probably a few degrees down, but not much. And if you can just kind of have a lot of faith in what you're doing and setting up your body, then a long iron isn't a hard club to hit. And I think when I was younger, I just used to swing hard at them. You look down at your 3 iron. I used to play these 710 MD blades when I was like 15. I was like, I just really want to learn to play with blades, and I still do to this day. I really enjoy the sound and the feel of them. Plus, I'm not doing it for a living, so I don't really have to care about anything else. And I think I used to just swing really hard because I was like, these need so much speed. I need to like hit the ball in the air. I need to like put so much into them. And you really, really don't. Like a 3 iron is going to go lower than an 8 iron, right? Or it'll maybe go about the same height, but it's not going to look that long. And so, yeah, honestly, I'm trying to make pretty much the exact same golf swing until I get into my wedges. And at that point, there may be a few things I do to affect flight and spin and whatever. But ultimately, my iron game is about, can I hit this the right distance? And so am I choking down a little bit? Am I, like, it's like that pin high thing, right? It's like if I missed it 5 yards to the right, but I'm pin high, like good club, like there's a variability in golf. And I think it's really, really important to know when you approach the shot right, especially when you're approaching the green, and like, if it felt like it was a bad shot, like, was it actually that bad? Like, that's where like the educated golfer is like somebody who's really thought about the game a lot is just going to be so much better actually at like stress management and like managing themselves, because they know when to beat themselves up over something and when not to, right? Like if I got over a shot like an 8 iron or something like that, and I was aiming on the right side of the hole, like the bit fatter side of the green, I think it's the right club, and I literally just shank it, right? Like, and I'm in, like 60 yards, whatever, in front of me and to the right in the rough. Like, it's such a rare shot, and I was trying to do the right thing. And if I was fully committed to what I was doing, then like, why would I beat myself up for that? It's just an aberration, right? So, and then on the flip side, it's like I see so many pretty good golfers aim right at the flag with an 8 iron in their hand, and it's cut 4 yards off of this bunker that's in a terrible position to be in, right? Or maybe there's a ton of sand in them, or like you have to realize like sometimes some bunkers are way more penal than others. and they aim right at the stick, they hit it in the bunker, and then they like just they get so frustrated, or they think, oh, I was so close. And you're like, well, hey, it's just like there's always gonna be a possibility you hit it in there, but you invited too much possibility, right? And just knowing what was a pretty good shot versus and letting yourself off the hook versus knowing the difference, I guess, is so good for your stress level while you're playing. And you just watch good players when they're playing really good, they're not worried about anything. Like if you watch somebody who's playing the best golf of their life and they're just having fun, they're trying to make putts, they're hitting tons of greens, they're off the tee, it's a joke. And they're just hitting the ball there, hit the ball there, hit the ball there, hit the ball there. And if they make a double, they're gonna laugh because they haven't made a double in like 40 holes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's like they're just on a run. It's a blast. And so if you really kind of think about what that mindset is, it's like really kind to yourself, really like approach, like very consistent in the approach, and having a really, really positive attitude. And that's like, the game does so many things to you that hurt, that make that very difficult, right? But when you're hitting it good and you're doing all the right things, they just snowball, and you're like, all of a sudden you're just having so much fun.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Like so many good. Yeah. No, but as you're speaking, I'm trying to think about how we can connect the dots for the people listening. Like what a couple things I heard in there that are so powerful, I think. First one being, like you said, you hit a bad shot, like, and you use the shank as the example. And I remember when I used to hit bad shots, oftentimes I would go right back to the drawing board for the next swing. I'd think, oh man, you have to redo your golf swing. Like you just hit a shot that is so bad. Like we need to start from the drawing board. And something you called out is like, okay, a good player hits a bad shot and they just remain consistent in their approach. Like you have a set of beliefs in terms of this is a neutral grip, this is neutral alignment, I want to make this type of golf swing. If you hit a bad shot, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You're like, we don't need to restart this whole thing. it was a bad swing and we move on. And I, at least sharing from my personal experience, for so many years, it was just like, it was like Paris traffic. Like I hit one left and then I went back to the drawing board and then I hit one right and then I hit one left. And I think the consistency of approach, like you're talking about, is something the better player does that maybe the struggling amateur isn't as good with. And then the second piece of that, you talked about aiming at a pin and short siding yourself, like hitting a pretty decent shot, but short siding yourself in a tough spot. Like how many times, I mean, we've heard it so many times in this podcast, like players saying they're more conservative, not conservative maybe, but like middle of the green with an 8-iron is a good shot. Like you said, you invited the possibility of too much risk into that shot. And I think the scratch decision-making process is a little more, conservative is not the right word, but it's a little more thoughtful in the sense that we understand that we're not hitting it onto a beach towel or a pool table every single time from 165 yards with an 8-iron. Like we have our dispersion cone. I think they said on the PGA Tour with a 6-iron, it's 30 yards. And with the driver, it's like 60 to 65 yards. So when I'm approaching a shot with like a mid to longer iron, I'm playing for, I know that I'm not going to hit this perfect every time. And so I'm playing to give myself some room for error. And I think you also kind of called that out there. And it's like, scratch processes, we don't expect perfect. We have a pretty disciplined process. And also in selecting targets, we're disciplined with selecting targets. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, now we kind of get into course management, and also then, the other side of that could be like self-management too. Right. But I think like, I mean, what's your best chance of making birdie, right? It's to put it in the fairway or really close to the green, one of the two. I mean, if it's a short enough hole, and then giving yourself a putt, preferably the shortest putt, right? But like you're not going to dunk it from the fairway almost ever, and you should never plan for it, right? Like what you should plan for is to give yourself a makeable, a hopefully higher percentage putt at birdie, and also risk adjusting for making a double or bogey or worse, right? Like the chance, like the amount of times you make a par when you're putting for birdie versus scrambling is just like astronomically different, right? And so when you think about the game of golf, like you're like, oh, you're trying to get it in the hole with the least strokes possible, right? And it's like, okay, but you still need to hit it like even if you're on fire, you still gonna hit that golf ball 65 times. So what kind of shots are you going to need to hit in order to get it to complete 18 holes with 65 shots? Well, you're going to need to be in really good hot positions, avoid disaster, right? First and foremost, avoid disaster. Then you're in really good positions. Okay, what did you do from there? And then did the ball fall or not, right? Was your touch good? Did you get a few to drop, right? And I think that's what most people don't realize. Even if they're on the perfect example is this: if you're a new golfer or an average golfer, even a 10 handicap, and they're hitting a bunker shot, or a chip. It's amazing how often they're going right at that stick.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, whoa, like if you don't hit that, like that's a really hard shot because you're just aiming at the hole, right? Like you're just trying to, and you might get it hung up in the rough. You might hit it long and run through. There's a variability there. So a good player will always kind of almost play to the safe side of the hole, even when they're chipping, right? So they do it from the fairway. They're doing it from the green side too, right? And they're setting up a look, preferably 4 feet and in, but sometimes 6 and 8 feet. And if it's a flat uphill putt, they might make that putt, right? And they might say, okay, good. That was a tough spot to be in when I was chipping. And there was a lot of potential for that to go wrong. And what did I do? I gave myself a look. And that's like always priority number one, right? So many double bogeys happen because you chipped twice. And that shouldn't happen.
It's so simple, and it's almost like it's taboo to talk about, but like there's stats out there that show the difference between the numbers of birdies per round between an 18 handicapper and a scratch is like the difference is 2 birdies per round. So it's really not the sexy dart that you hit in there to 4 feet that separates a scratch and even let's just call it like a 6 or an 8 or a 10 handicap. It's really the fact that 8 handicap or 10 handicap short sides themselves 3 or 4 more times around, maybe 5 times around, maybe leaves one in the bunker, like you said, trying to hit the perfect shot to the pin. And the scratch cap is going to play more towards like, if I hit the green and I have a look and it's a stress-free par, like it's, I don't want to say it's more about bogey avoidance or mistake avoidance, but that's kind of what it is. Like scratch golf is about limiting the doubles, like you said, limiting the really big numbers, making a heck of a lot of pars, making a handful of birdies here and there. And if you get on a run, you shoot the odd low number. But I think that's kind of scratch golf can be boring. And that's people think it's like you do hit some beautiful shots, but when you're playing your best, it almost looks boring. It's just like, okay, I kind of put a ball in play. I hit a ball to the middle of the green. If I have a wedge in my hand, if I'm 100 yards, maybe I get a little more aggressive. But if I'm outside of that, the go zone, I'm going to kind of play to the center of the green. Maybe I make a 30, 20 footer. Maybe I just 2-putt and I move on. Right. And it's not always flashy. And I think you're just calling it out there. Like the pin is not always your target. And it's a little more thoughtful. It's a little more intentional. And I was playing with a guy last year and he had one of the Garmin like GPSs on his waist. And all he was looking at was the middle number. He's a beauty at the golf club I play at. And he's probably like, he's maybe a 4 or 5 cap. And he gets a lot out of his game for the tools that he has. And he just said, dude, all I'm looking at is the middle of that green. Like that's where just give me the middle number. That's where I'm aiming. And he is one of the most like successful guys that I see, like gets so much out of himself. And I think a lot of people would benefit from that. Like this guy's never trying to hit the hero shot. He's just trying to be steady Eddie. And it's like, that's a pretty good approach, pretty good way to lower the bogeys and doubles.
Yeah. It's like, if you take a golfer of almost any skill and you give them 18 looks at birdie, like what are they going to shoot? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No
like of a variable of many different distances, right? Like they're going to shoot great round. Like, right. They might get 1 or 2 to drop. They might 3-putt 2 or 3 times. And like, they shoot 1 over and that's just that. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it like that, because there is so much variability when you're standing on the tee, right? The other part is, again, not hitting it out, not hitting it into water, not, taking on this excessive risk. It honestly, for me, like, the term boring golf, right? Like the guy who goes out and makes 15 pars, like, or more, like I wish I could be that person. Like, actually, that's like what I aspire to be, is just like that really rock solid person that like signs the card at the end of the day and you're like, what? Like you shot 71? Like, I didn't even see you out there almost, right? And whereas I honestly find I'm a little bit more volatile than that. And that has to do with, like I mentioned, right? Like my strengths being drivers and irons. And then, around the green, things can get a little bit more difficult for me. And also not playing a lot, you're just not super, super sharp with touch, I find. So that's been what I've been trying to get to, is like get my swing into a place where I feel like I could play often and have a really good time and see what happens. And yeah, like ideally it's like a boring round, but for me it'll be just an incredible feeling at the end of the day.
And it doesn't always work out that way. Like we like you said, sometimes there's fireworks out there and you hit a big miss, and that's just the nature of golf. But if you go in there with the intention of, let's try to avoid mistakes, let's play like smart golf, like it's going to be better than I'm going to fire at every flag and you make an 8 and you make a 2, and that's not a sustainable way to play good golf.
You're signing yourself up for, well, like it not to work out, like firing at flags. Like I think when a tour pro says that, say they're like, 10 shots back going into Sunday, and they say, I'm just going to fire at a lot of flags. Like, I think what they means is like I'm going to aim 2 yards closer to it than I would have yesterday. Which was, and I'm still not aiming at it. Like, cause they know they need a putt, right? Like, so all they're going to try and do is say like, hey, I'm not going to settle for a 15-footer. And these guys are good enough. I'm not going to settle for a 15-footer today because I need to make up ground. I'm going to try and hit it to 6 feet on the safe side. And then that's what fire at flags means. It's not literally firing at flags, because on Sunday, those are all put really close to things that can cost you many, many shots. And you just need a chance. You need a look, right? And that's the goal of every hole, is, do I have a look at birdie? Well, then you played that really, really well.
I love it, man. Before we get into the 19th hole, that's where I want to focus on your recent authorship.
Sure.
You mentioned with irons, it's really about distance control, and it's about kind of repeatability of distance and things of that nature. So is there anything that you're conscious of in your iron game to try to promote repeatability of distance?
Distance. Yeah. Like knowing your actual carry numbers is something that's like, I think as golfers, I mean, if you asked me right now, like how far do you hit an 8-iron, I'd say like 165 ish. Like I know what I can't hit it, but like I don't know like that exact number, and it's like, why not, right? Like I'm constantly making these judgment calls, but like why am I trying to put this like sort of foggy idea over these different shots? And so definitely that, like knowing your actual numbers, because you just do not, like it pretty much doesn't matter, right? Like if I have an 8-iron in my hand, like I can't make a driver swing with an 8-iron. Like I just can't get that speed. The club's shorter, it's heavier, it's just not going to go that far. So if I'm 170, like there's literally no 8-iron I could hit without sculling it that's going to go 170, right? Like if I'm hitting this in the middle, it's going to be max 165, maybe 167 if I get it, high on the face and it's not spinning as much or something like that. But like rarely am I even is it going to be a possibility? So I think understanding that, right? Like I cannot hit this that far. So do I need more out of it? Well, then I can't hit this club. And so I think it's like, and then your club selection really backs up into the whole alignment thing. Am I putting my process and my body into a position where I can make a really natural, low stress move to hit a great golf shot? Because most golf shots that are low stress are going to work out, right? And so I'm using an 8-iron as an example, but I think in the wedges it's even more important, right? Like if you're somebody who's ripping at a 60, like there's almost no shot in golf that's necessary for that unless you're trying to hit it over a tree really quickly or something like that, right? So like not asking too much out of your clubs, being honest with yourself and your distance. Distance isn't actually a good, like it's not like you ask any really good player, they don't care how far you can hit an 8-iron. They don't care how far you can hit a 6-iron. Like they just want to know that I can hit it where I want to and consistently as far as I need to in order to accomplish the golf shot. And I think I'm certainly that way. Like, again, I deliver a little bit more loft than other people, right? And that can cause some difficulty for me in my iron game in distance control, because, that ball might not be sort of penetrating as much sometimes if I kind of like stay behind it a bit, and it'll just kind of balloon a little bit, and that will cause a lot of distance variability. Then when I'm not hitting it good, that's typically what happens to me. But what will happen is like I can't hit a 56-degree wedge probably, I probably can't hit that 107 yards if you ask me to. Like it's just not possible with my swing, right? Whereas some people can just like they're on top of it. They just really strong grip and like nuke it, right? And that's so be it. But I just would never ask myself to. I would never care about what I'm hitting, I guess is the point I'm
Mhm.
trying to make, which is it's a silly thing. I feel like used to matter, but now iron lofts are literally all so jacked up that like it has nothing to do with the golfer, right? Like I hit a driver, I can hit it probably 310 or something like that, but my 8 iron goes 165 and not a shred over that. And that's totally fine because I know when it's appropriate and the rest of my bag covers the gaps I need, right? So yeah, making sure that you're not asking out of any club and setting up, giving yourself a really low stress, smooth, comfortable option to hit the shot that's required is going to be the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's just it's gold. Like you're literally you're preaching about how to. It doesn't matter your technique and the way that you swing the club, but this is an approach that's just applicable to everybody who's hitting iron shots. Like it's about repeatability, and you're not going to get repeatability if you're trying to gorilla this 8 iron 175 yards because your buddy just hit
Yeah.
an 8 iron and he uses hollow body irons that are, like you said, 3 degrees stronger. So you're trying to hit that 8 too. Like if I want to hit the club the same distance every time, like I'm probably going to make a balanced swing. I'm probably going to swing within myself, make a balanced swing to like a poised finish. I'm not going to overswing, swing out of my shoes. Like that's something I see a lot with people who are maybe, like you said, ego players, or they're just they're just not they haven't clued into like it's not about how far, it's about repeatability and how often, really, like how often am I hitting this number. And I think when you wrap your head around that concept of like, I don't care if you hit your 8 iron 150, do you hit your 8 iron 150 every time or within a reasonable margin? And like that perspective and how you get there through swinging within yourself it's just such a powerful concept. Like I think that's one of the keys to good iron play is, and we heard another guest share the exact same thing, like don't overswing your irons, period.
Yeah, exactly. Take enough club, take enough and then let it happen. And like they're the best feeling shots, like I mentioned earlier, right? It lands just behind the pin, stops, and you've hit it hole high, right? Like and then the other thing that is actually sort of like a secondary effect of this is when you're really swinging a lot or really hard at something, you're going to add a ton of spin to it. So, I might try and, I want to get 157 out of this 9 iron. Well, now I've just hit it. It's got way more spin on it. And it's going to suck back on me. So I'm actually not going to get one. I might land 157, but if it's soft, like that's just not going to matter. Right. And so, like there's literally no benefit to under clubbing yourself. It's actually like just a cause for a lot of stress, right? Stress over the ball, and then the results not going to get.
And before we move on to chatting about your book here, I heard this stat and I've shared it in another episode, but the GIR percentage when the pin was at the back was way higher than when the pin was at the front for pros and amateurs alike. And essentially it's just like when the pin's at the back, you're grabbing more club and then you end up hitting the meat of the green, whereas the pins at the front, you're always at that, just at the edge of this number, like you're playing that number and like you said, it just comes off a little high, a little spinny, a little short mishit, and you miss the green. And it's like GIR percentage is a great correlator with handicap level. And so back to just like you said, swinging within yourself, hit the meat of the green, give yourself a putt at birdie, and like watch your scores just fall.
Yeah, that's an amazing way of explaining it, right? One pin you're taking on, so you're gonna underclub yourself. And a lot of people think, I don't want a downhill putt. Like, give me a downhill putt over an uphill chip, right? Like, seriously, like no one's like, we're not tour pros, like we're not like, it's not that easy to chip. Downhill putt's pretty simple. So I think that's a really interesting way of explaining it. And I think there's one thing I wish that I could do, which is like sit beside the green and then send myself to the tee on like a par 3 and hit like a 7 iron and then hit a 6 iron and really just look at how much further the 6 iron goes, right? Like 10 yards, like when you're standing greenside, right, isn't very far. So like, I think we get so worried about taking too much club and hitting it long or something. Like if it's a back pin, sure, like then you're taking that on, right? If you put too much club in your hand. So the safe side is going to be less club. But like, let's just say it's in the middle, right? Like taking that extra club is only going to fly at like, 10 yards, maybe 11 yards, 12 yards further than the previous club if you hit it full. And so
Mhm.
if you don't hit it full, if you take a light 6 instead of a normal 7, right? Like that's going to be adding 8 yards to it. 8 yards is just into the safe side of the green is just like a dart. And that's something I find like now that I'm starting to manage my approach game a bit better, I'm like, and especially I'm playing a lot of wind out here. It's like it can be quite windy. And so sometimes when I just throw it, like I make a great strike with the right club into like the fattest section of the green. I'm like, I almost just like that feels like I just hit it to 3 feet. You know what I mean? It's like
Hundo.
there's a very difficult shot, right? And I've made a great golf swing to my target, and I've just like locked it down, and that just feels like so. Going back to like sort of how to read the result of your shot, right? Like a good player is going to do that and know that that was great, right? Like, wow, that thing is like 30 kilometers of wind, like right to left. Like this is going to be a very hard one to put in there, or maybe it's dead into the wind, right? Like there's a lot of variability. And what did I do? I put it right where I needed to. I took the right target. I hit the right shot. And that's going to be like, that's the stuff you should be taking tons of confidence from. Whereas, you know, that might look mediocre to somebody who doesn't play very much. I said, oh, that's fine. But, you know, it's an outside look at birdie. It's like, well, there were a lot of possibilities before that ball was hit, right?
And dude, how many times do you hit that shot, like you said, and you get up to the green and you're like, oh, damn, like this is actually a look. Like you're 25 feet, 30 feet. Like you hit the extra club, you hit it, you flushed it, you hit it 10 yards long in the pin, 30 feet, and you get up there and you're like, oh, this is a good look. Like as you get closer to the ball, it gets closer and closer. And let's be honest, like, I mean, Jack Nicklaus said it. He might hit like 3 or 4 good shots around or whatever the number was. Like, as a scratch golfer, I miss hit so many golf shots, Jordo. Like, I get out there and I miss hit more shots than I catch out of the face. Like, when I really pure one, it's almost a bit of a surprise. Like, granted, it's not a massive miss hit, but like, I'm miss hitting more shots than I'm puring, and the ball isn't quite traveling as far. So, like, when I got into the habit of, if it's a front pin, I'm playing middle. And if it's a back pin, I'm playing sort of middle to back. Usually if there's trouble back, I'm just playing middle-ish, maybe a little long of middle, but I'm like, honestly, dude, as I've gotten better, I'm never firing at these front pins anymore because they're sucker pins. I'm taking 5-10 yards more, knowing that, hey, I'm just going to hit the middle. If I miss it a little bit, I threw a dart by accident. Like, and I'm giving myself, like, I'm building in some margin for error to like still hit a good golf shot. And I mean, Tiger said this, like, aggressive shots to conservative targets, or committed shots to more conservative targets. So like, I'm not in there just trying to whiff on the longer club. It's like, no, I'm still making like a good balanced swing, like committed swing. I'm just playing to like a safer spot on the green. I'm just not banking on like, hey, I better catch this one. I better hit my Sunday best here if I'm going to hit a good shot. Otherwise I'm scrambling for a par. Like, I don't want to scramble out there.
No, you don't. Like that's exactly what that's stress, right? Like best golf there's not a lot of that. And I think this is a lot of what we're talking about is I learned through Decade, which is the Scott Fawcett's sort of like framework or like, I guess, philosophy on course management, which is really, I think, a lot of professional golf philosophy. And now like many people are sort of ascribing to what he's teaching, which is awesome. And it really opened my eyes. I only found it like much later than when I was playing a lot of competitive golf, but it helped me so much because like with your scoring clubs, right? Like you probably hit them, up to your 8-iron or whatever. You hit them actually, like even if you miss hit it a bit, like an iron is still going to go like a fairly decent distance. Same with wedges, right? They're long and short. They're very consistent distance-wise. But and what's amazing to me is like you'll be like, oh, like I pushed that or something, or why I missed it like 3 yards right. But if it's the right distance, that's a great look. It's 12 foot. It's 12 feet, right? Like that's it's 9 feet. Like that's an insanely reasonable look at birdie. So I think, and you've eliminated bogey. So that's something I find is really interesting, is getting the right distance is really such a skill in its own, right? Like, and it's particularly when it's windy. It's remarkable how much club you need to hit when there's a lot of wind in, like, and because it just hits that wall, right? Like that's really an art form that I honestly didn't know until I started playing out here on Vancouver Island. There's a lot of wind, particularly in the winter too. It can be just going right off the water, and it's hilarious when you're playing in that. And honestly, like, you knowing how much more difficult that makes golf is what makes it fun to play in, because you're not going to shoot 65, Jordan. You absolutely, there's no chance when it's blowing even 20 that's possible. And so that's that's just the name of the game. And understanding that, right? You look at the PGA Tour pros, at the players, like when it gets a little windy, it's variable. It just becomes more variable. They're not any worse. It's just golf becomes really hard when you have that extra dimension, right? And then when it's soft or calm, they're just throwing darts out there because they're that good. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's what makes it so exciting. But I think a lot of it is like managing the course, and that helps you manage yourself really, really well. And then you can have a lot more fun and just not be so hard on yourself.
Love it, man. I think we beat a dead horse on the irons. Like, swing within yourself, pick more conservative targets. Like 30 feet's a good look. It's all about getting repeatable. It's like repeatable distance, mistake avoidance, miss it on the right side of the hole, and don't be so hard on yourself. Like, you're going to get better.
Absolutely.
But Jordan, I want to be mindful of your time, and also I want to make sure we chat about your book. So, I mean, for our listeners here, like what inspired you to write this novel? And yeah, take us through the process. Like, I would love to just hear it in your own words.
Yeah, sure. This very recent thing for me, and not something I've really done before to this point. I've always loved writing, loved reading, but I hadn't really created a work that I felt like sharing with the world. And so, yeah, this has been a really fun process for me. After we finished school golf, I was just working and not playing very much at all. And I found myself just like thinking so much about golf. And I think I bought like every single golf book in like the golf literary canon is like on my bookshelf now. And I guess I just found that like, I was like, this is great. And I just felt myself getting really, really into the game. Then I started to play it a lot more when I moved out here, and like, it's just on fire with it recently. And I just found that a lot of it was sort of nonfiction, like how you can get better. And like, ideally, like realistically, it sounds a lot like you should buy this book. Like, right. It's like a business book, right? It's like, you can give me the Coles notes and like, I can decide if I want to take it or leave it. But like, they're all instructional or some sort of something like that. And I just felt like I didn't feel exactly like that's also like that's that interesting, or any of that would be new. And plus, like, I don't know enough about, I mean, we're talking a lot about golf swing and stuff and what works for me, but I'm no teacher or professional, teaching professional for sure. So leave that to them. And I thought that I felt like there was something about the game that did a few things. Like everyone, I guess the genesis of the book was this: golf is always used as a metaphor for life, but I don't really find that it's actually that good of one. They're like, oh man, you tried, like we talked about, right? Like, you can play it right or you can play it wrong. So I don't really get how, it's not like you're rolling the dice, right? I don't find that it's really that much like life whenever that metaphor is used. And so what I wanted to do was actually show a bunch of lives playing the game of golf. And so using golf as this like high stress sort of expose on these fictional characters that I came up with, but also bringing five technically people that are kind of like don't really know each other that well, but golf know each other, right? Like, and bringing them into a club match on a Wednesday morning. And so that's kind of been like, that was sort of the idea. It was like, how can I like just kind of find something in golf that how can I use golf to show people that I think are worth considering? And that's kind of how it came to be. And I started to kind of write up a few character profiles and whatever, and then kind of piece it together. Also, kind of plot out the match. It's a match play format. So, and then what's going on in their lives, right? And then how does that show up? So it was a really fun process. I think because it's so structured, the game of golf is structured in such a way that I have a lot of fun with it, and just kind of, it felt like I was almost paint by number. It was kind of like, I know once I knew the people, I could just set them onto the golf course and notice the things that I'm noticing about them, and sort of show more and more of them and understand them a bit better. And hopefully the reader gets that as well.
Yeah. Having read it, like, what was the coolest part for me was chatting with you after and you explaining that you kind of base these characters loosely on elements of yourself. So you see little bits of yourself in all the characters. And I think a lot of golfers will relate to the lives of these people, and not necessarily, we don't know all about their lives, but just the way that these people are, and the way that they think. Like I know myself personally, I've related to a little bit around all the characters, and just the way that you phrased everything, and the fact that there were some illustrations of every hole throughout the 18 hole match. Like when I read it, I over that 3 hour period, I couldn't put it down. And it transported me to Victoria Golf Club where you were describing this match taking place. And when I finished, I opened my, like kind of opened my eyes. I'm like, I just felt like I was there. So I mean, it was one of the coolest golf reads that I've read in a long time. And I'm kind of like you, or I'm a golf sicko and I consume a lot of material. And it was really neat, and it was niche. And anybody who's interested in the game of golf, anybody who like appreciates tournament golf as well, like I think we'll just find it like a really refreshing read. And you're also super candid and vulnerable in terms of like some of the takes that these characters have, and I know some of them came from you, and I related to them as well. So really powerful read. And yeah, just kudos to you, man, for putting this piece of art together. And for our listeners, like, how are you going to be distributing this material? Like, how can they get the book? And I also want to make sure that I pronounce it correctly. It's Shisto Circa Growth Through Golf.
Yeah, that's right. Shisto Circa Growth Through Golf. Yeah. Yeah.
Where are they going to find this?
Yeah. So I'm kind of, it's all, again, sort of DIY. I've completed it. I'll be selling them myself. And I really wanted to take a grassroots approach to this. Like the audience is pretty niche, right? If you want to read an entire novel about one match and the people involved, then, you know, this is for you. And I think, you know, just through golf, right? Like people, you know, we're always sharing things like this, right? Oh, did you listen to this? Did you see this? And I think all golfers consume a lot of golf content. And so, yeah, I'm going to be selling them, shistocirca.com. I will link it here. You'll be able to buy a paperback or a Kindle version. And yeah, it's something I think it's you know, written to be timeless, something you can revisit. It's a very fast read, fast paced. And yeah, I think, again, it's showing these people and where they are with themselves through the game of golf. I think uniquely because you're on your own in golf, and you're in some ways, right? Like you have a caddy, and in this case they have two caddies. But you're really on your own, and it is a vulnerable game, right? You're out there with yourself, really, right? And you're responsible for what's going on. And I think that shows exactly who people are, right? I mean, that's one of those things, that one of the golf maxims that like is, I think, really accurate. Maybe not golf as a metaphor for life, but golf as an exposure of people, for sure. And that's exactly what this is about. It's exactly what this book tries to do. So yeah.
And I think it's cool, the avenue that you took as well. Like, to your point there, it really reflects where you're at in your life. Not to expose too much of the content, but when you're a younger golfer and golf is your life, you think in a certain way and you act in a certain way, and it kind of reflects where you are in your thought process and your maturity level. And also maybe some of the things that you were raised with and certain pressures and things of that nature. But as you get older and you start to view it through a different lens, and we said at the beginning of the episode, like almost come to appreciate it even more for what it is. I think this book just prompted on my end, at least, a lot of thoughtfulness. And it was kind of a bit of a remember when, because I could see myself as that younger player in the match. I could see myself as the guy who was a little older. Yeah, it was thought provoking. It just really got me appreciating the game actually even more than I had been before. And if you're somebody who's listening to this podcast, you care about the game, you want to get better, and you appreciate, like, I guess, the softer elements of golf or the thoughtfulness in golf. So if you're finding value in this podcast, I would definitely recommend giving it a listen. And I know you mentioned, Jordo, it's grassroots. There's going to be a Kindle version, which is super accessible. I know you said there'll be some paperbacks as well if people are looking for the harder copy.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that, man. If that's what you got out of it, then I think I succeeded, and I'm really happy to hear it, and excited to share it with everyone.
Awesome, man. Well, once again, do want to be mindful that we do need to get you out of here. But Jordo, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Like, I know we haven't chatted in a while, but it's always just feels like we never left and we just pick up where we were at. And I really appreciate your takes on the game and respect you as a player, respect you as a person. And can't thank you enough for joining us on Behind the Brim tonight.
Thanks, Cam. Likewise, man. This is awesome and really cool to be a part of it.
Appreciate it, man. And one last thing, I'm very excited to go to the range and just be a little more disciplined with the things that you talked about. So thanks for calling that out.
Absolutely. Let me know how it goes.
Will do, brother. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Behind the Brim. We'll be releasing podcasts every Monday. And if you want more golf content, follow us on social at behindthebrim_golf on both Instagram and TikTok. Hope you have a great week.